Hi, TheCinemaRanger here, and today on this lovely winter day, actually, it's a winter day still in Chicago, although you really couldn't tell it's winter, March 1st, I believe. First hints of spring. Today I wanted to explore Bombshell. I actually watched the film a few weeks ago, but it took me a long time to wrap my brain around what I wanted to say about the film. I remember walking out of it feeling like I had really enjoyed what I just saw. I enjoyed it on a dramatic level. It had moved me. It felt very powerful. I'd come out of the movie with kind of this uneasy feeling, and of course the content I think is very jarring and disturbing at times, and all of that made sense. But there was this other level of discontent inside of me that I couldn't quite reconcile. Something in the film just wasn't quite syncing up, and I usually like to be able to identify these things either as a flaw in the film or at least something that, you know, is a deeper level of meaning. And as it turns out, I think this film perhaps does have a deeper level of meaning, and so I'm going to go ahead and get into that. But let me a little backstory as to what this uneasy feeling was. It's about these, you know, obviously you've seen the film, spoilers and stuff by the way, but you know, it's about this two very powerful conservative women, Gretchen Carlson and Megyn Kelly, and yet the film does not present their stories from an especially conservative viewpoint. In fact, looking at the movie, the underlying sort of political rhetoric seems to be far more progressive and liberal, really, particularly in regards to the Kate McKinnon character and how she reveals herself to be sort of this closet liberal, living in this Fox world. And I thought that was interesting because the film, in that sense, is almost apologetic or indifferent to the very roles that Gretchen Carlson and Megyn Kelly played in the rise of contemporary conservatism. And I thought it was a strange choice because, you know, you would think a film about these women would probably lean more towards a conservative audience, at least on the surface level. I would think that. And I don't think it does. I think the film is more concerned with reaching out to a liberal audience. And that was the unease. That was the source of unease, because I couldn't really figure out what the point of that was. Like, why let these women off the hook, per se, if we're going to demonize contemporary conservatism, as the film largely does? Why let them off the hook? They played a role in its rise, and the, you know, the filmmakers are certainly welcome to their viewpoint. I happen to agree with largely what it says politically, but I still thought it was odd. Like, okay, so we're going to do that. And so it took me a long time to sort of figure out why that was done. And I think one of the reasons it took me so long to figure out is because I was preoccupied with Megyn Kelly, Gretchen Carlson. They're obviously, you know, the two of the lead characters in there, and you got Margot Robbie as sort of this fictional Kayla character thrown in there. I think I had fixated on the wrong characters. I want to go back to this idea of the Kate McKinnon character. And she plays a character named Jess, and like the Kayla character, she's also fictional, and the writers and the filmmakers talk about them sort of being an amalgamation of different women, because they couldn't use an actual person, so they created this fictional proxy. And movies do that all the time, by the way. They take real people and sort of clump them into one. Chernobyl did this with the one scientist, I forget her name, but she's really an amalgamation of many different scientists. So they'll create fictional representations of actual people in biographical style films. Nothing wrong with that. But in thinking about the Kate McKinnon character, I began to realize perhaps what this film was really trying to do wasn't so much apologize for the viewpoints of conservative women and the rise that they played, but really try to challenge women in power to ask themselves, have they looked at their role in the way these sorts of dynamics play out? Have they really assessed it? Because there's a great speech that Margot Robbie's character Kayla gives to Charlize Theron's Megyn Kelly, where she says, you know, why did you wait so long? Why didn't you say anything? She says, you had power. In this case, she's specifically referring to the power that Megyn Kelly would have had to challenge Roger Ailes, to stand up to him and force him to confess to his sexual harassment and sexual assault crimes much earlier than he was forced to. But I think the broader message, because if it's true that there are any number of sort of liberal women hiding out amongst conservative ranks, then perhaps what Kayla's question to Megyn Kelly really refers to is, why is it women of power aren't more often calling out patriarchal systems? You know, and I don't know, is that fair for the film to do it? I think it is in terms of contemporary feminism. It isn't just a matter of like where men are culpable in situations of power wielding and misuse of power, but it's also a question of when women do it themselves or abide by it when women see it and allow it to happen. So I don't know. I guess that's where I eventually found myself sitting with this film, is that it doesn't call them out politically so much as it calls out women who have power, and probably the demographic of the film is liberal, middle class, and upper middle class white women. And so I think in a sense what the film is doing is calling out those women. Have you used your power for justice and good? When you can, because you have power, and maybe sometimes these women don't see it. I don't know. That's, again, I feel like there's so much of this film that is lingering under the subsurface. There was this disconnect, and I don't myself want to just apologize for the film, nor do I think I need to, or that does any good, but, you know, because I like the movie and I want to stand up for it. But I do think there's something else there, that it isn't just political evasion, but maybe a more sort of broad challenge to those who harbor the ability to do something but choose not to. Yes, who have the ability. That's the key word. Those who are in power who do nothing. So yeah, that's kind of where I settled with this film, and so it presents us with veneers. Now this is interesting because I mentioned earlier that I think the film targets probably middle class and upper middle class white women, but I don't necessarily think that's the demographic that really needs to see it. I'll get to this in a minute. Because, you know, so much of this film is about veneers and whatnot. But before I get to that, I just want to mention, speaking of veneers, that Charlize Theron is amazing in this film, as she almost always is amazing. And I think sometimes her performances get a little undersold because she's so good. I don't know if that's the thing that can happen, but she buries herself so totally in the transformation from Charlize Theron into Megyn Kelly, at least I thought so, that maybe it was hard to even think of it as a performance. I don't know. I thought she was incredible. I thought all the performances were great, but I especially thought Charlize Theron, and I kind of always think Charlize Theron is pretty much amazing. I think she's probably one of the top actors of our time, and her ability to totally immerse herself physically and emotionally into the character. And I suppose if she has one drawback, it's that as a very intellectual human being, her characters sometimes come across as a little cold. I really like the humanity she brought to this character this time. There was a vulnerability in her performance that maybe we don't always see with Charlize Theron performances, that took it up a whole other notch. But like I said, I kind of like them all. Getting back to my whole like demographic exploration, because I think what I said earlier, you know, who is this film aimed at, and it being, you know, women in power, there's possibly a better audience for this, and it comes from my own experience in watching the film. I was quite chilled by it. I have never experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. I do not necessarily anticipate experiencing sexual harassment in the workplace. I think I'm relatively safe. White men in general, I don't think experience a lot, and you know, it does happen, but statistically it's fairly rare compared to women. So it's not something I've sort of thought about a great deal. And I thought, walking out of this film, what really shook me up was just how frightening and upsetting it would be to be in a position of being put in that position by an employer, by a boss, by someone with, and in the case of Roger Ailes, it's not just a boss, but it's someone with incredible influence across the board. And knowing that to turn him down isn't just to walk away from Fox, it would be to walk away from any number of jobs because of the power he wields and also the reputation that Fox carried with it. And I of course I always thought of sexual harassment as something troublesome and upsetting, but I think this brought a level of empathy and humanity to it that I had never pinned to it before. It opened my eyes to just how traumatizing this kind of experience could actually be to someone. And I kind of walked away thinking, boy, if there's an audience that needs to see this film, it doesn't matter who it's targeted to, if there's an audience that needs to see this film, it's probably men, especially men who have some flexibility in their viewpoints, who have the ability to empathize with a character and see their plight and allow their own biases or ideas to be challenged by it. I mean, I walked out of here wondering, have I ever done anything like this to someone? I can't think of anything, and I don't think I've ever had power, so probably not. But it was an alert. If I ever have power, I hope that this is a movie that stays inside of me so that I never become seduced by the delusions of that power, that I think I can just do as I will. Because to me, the film did such a good job of making the fear and trauma and anxiety of the women so palpable, so strong. It just hung in the air like this rock, and I just felt for them and sympathized with them, and was so sort of pleased at the idea of some kind of justice, although the justice itself was dubious at best, but still. So men, if you're a subscriber and you want to broaden your horizons and really challenge yourself with seeing things from a perspective that maybe because of our privilege we don't think about too much, because we don't have to think about being sexually harassed, at least most of us don't, I would definitely watch this film and take it inside so that you can be like, okay, I don't want to be this guy, I don't want to be like those guys, I want to do better than that. I don't know, how much can movies change us? Sometimes I like to think that movies are more of a reflection on what we care about rather than a force that forces us into one thing or another. But to the extent that a movie can change us, I think this one has that potential. And if for no other reason, I would add Bombshell to your viewing list and check it out and see what you think about this whole idea that the film maybe is even more oriented to women in power, which is interesting given its subject matter, but still there. At any rate, I'm the Cinema Ranger. If you like this video or you like any of my other videos, please subscribe and pass the word on to those you know so that they can, tell them. And I'd love to do more of these, and the more subscribers and the more videos that get watched, the more likely it is I'll be able to do more of these things. Yeah, please subscribe, and I hope our paths cross someday.